Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
Hello and welcome to Grilling JR. This is Paul Bromwell, and I'm joined by the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. JR, how are you this week?
I'm good. Conrad's still in that cabin, and he's doing a rewrite of the Deliverance theme.
So bing, 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 bing.
That's it. That's it. So, no, Conrad's away.
We may need to send search and rescue.
He's all right. You can't hide him. So there you go.
Great point.
It's all good though. Everything's good.
Good, man.
Feeling good. A lot of things on making some plans to go to England in April.
Oh, tell us about that.
For a little 2-day deal. I don't have all the details. I know I got booked. I'll have more information on it. It's in April in I think Liverpool. It's an all-star cast. I know that. I was never, when I looked at the lineup of all the folks from wrestling that are going to be that are booked, it's pretty amazing actually. I mean, they got like Trish and Lita, Steiners, Dudleys, among many, many others. So I'm excited about that opportunity. It's a little 2-day deal, Saturday, Sunday. So I won't miss any AEW TV or nothing. So it should be fun. I haven't done anything like this since before COVID, so it's been a long time. I enjoy them. I enjoy meeting the fans. So we'll have more distinct information on it surely by next week. I do know it's in April. I'm pretty sure it's in Liverpool. Every time we went to Liverpool for WWE back in the day, Lawler had to go to the Beatles Museum. He's probably been there 100 times. But he's such a Beatles fan, he never got enough, so it's good. So it'll be a fun little trip, all good. And, this is a interesting week for AEW. We had, being in Stanford, where our rooms were, it was kind of odd. And near where I used to live was interesting. So it's all good, though. Our business, AEW business is good. TV shows have been solid. At least that's my biased opinion. And so things are looking all right, man. I'm happy. Feeling better every day.
That's good to hear. I know you're still traveling around on airplanes. The ankle, it's not as sensitive as far as travel and things like that?
No, it's still sensitive, but not as sensitive. It's healing better. And, it just takes time, patience, which I'm not versed too endowed with patience. I want to get well now. So, but it's been a long trip, long journey on this damn thing. So, but it's doing better. I'm looking right at it. It's all right.
Good.
It's coming along. So, in any event, we have a show to do today.
We do. We have a show to do today, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's Superbrawl II, JR. 30 years ago, it happened on a leap year. So this show took place February 29th, 1992. We're going to jump into that. But real quick, I do want to put a quick plug because you and I talked about this to end last week's show. You were just on ad-free shows last Thursday for a Zoom. How did that all turn out?
Okay. I never know how many people are in it or not. It doesn't really matter. Questions are good by and large. So I enjoy doing them. We do try to do one about once a month, it seems like. So, yeah, it's good. I enjoy it. Any interaction I can create or get involved in with the fan base is good for me. It's a good way to take heed of what they're thinking about, what they're interested in, things of that nature. So it's a good experience. But it was all right. Lauren did a nice job as always.
Good. I heard a lot of good feedback about it, but that's where it's at, man. Adfreeshows.com. I had to put a plug in because you were just there a few days ago. And that's where a lot of our members got to see you, talk with you, interact with you, ask you questions. Not only how you feeling, they're talking to you about how you're doing with, on the road, AEW. Obviously, they're building that big card to the pay-per-view. Lots of matches announced recently that we're excited about. So it's a lot of fun to interact with you there.
It's good. It's a good pay-per-view card. It's on a Sunday night. I kind of dig that. It's traditional in my world of pay-per-view. I've done more shows on Sunday than any other day from a pay-per-view perspective. So it's things are good. It's always fun to be building toward the pay-per-view. The matches get a little bit more intense. The stories are more clearly defined. I think that's good. And, and people are talking about the dog collar thing with Punk and MJF. I was around to see the original 183, and it was the talk of the business for a good while. And hopefully you can bet your ass that Punk and Max have both watched that match endlessly, I'm assuming. So it's all good.
I love the callback to history. I really do.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been overdone.
Nope.
It's not like an old match. It's a cage match, or it's whatever. It's not been wore out. So I think that's good. So I think it's good. I'm sure that both those two participants had a hell of a lot to do in picking out that stipulation.
Well, JR, you said it. That'll be a Sunday night pay-per-view. Let's jump into what we're here to discuss this week, and it is Superbrawl II, and that one was a Saturday night pay-per-view. As I look back in my calendar now, love that you can scroll back right in the iPhone, right through the calendar. Leap year, February 29th, 1992 was a Saturday night, and just between Starrcade 91 and this year, there's a Clash of Champions right in between, and there's some major news, just not in WCW, but in professional wrestling around this time as we think about building to this show. And it was Inside Edition. They do an expose piece based on Hulk Hogan lying on Arsenio Hall. I'm sure we all, if we're old enough, remember this whole deal about steroids. And then, you have Billy Graham literally says on television that he injected Hulk Hogan with steroids. Did you watch any of this, JR? What did you think of it? Did you think this was going to be this huge, gigantic media story that it turned out to be?
No, it's just, pro wrestling's like, it's just, it doesn't go away, and you can't kill it. So no, I didn't think that. And unless you're blind, you don't know that Hogan's obviously on some sort of supplements. So, but I never really got wrapped up in steroid stuff. I've never been a big believer that it's harmful or that it's not healthy if it's all done under doctor's care. And it's so simple to do that. But if the talents and the wrestlers think they could save a couple of bucks by going the black market route, they do. And they did. But I never saw I know if it's illegal, you shouldn't do it. I get that. But I just wondered sometimes if it wasn't overblown a little bit, the steroid use and how steroids were blamed on so many deaths. I don't know that to be true. Could be. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's it's an old, worn out story that hardly makes a ripple these days. Hey, folks, it's time to take your podcast game to the next level. And you certainly want to get your almighty push. My God, we have to have a push, right? We'll get that over to adfreeshows.com. Now, I'm telling you, if you're a fan of Grilling JR, adfreeshows.com has the entire episode library, and it's got no ads. 0 ads, zilch, none. Ad-free and on video starting at just $9. Did you hear what I said? $9. You spend more than that at Starbucks, for God's sakes. 2 mornings. If that's not all, folks, we got tons of bonus content, including my after-hours roundtable, where drinking was involved with Eric and Tony. You simply will not find a better value in all of wrestling. Hey, look, don't make me go red ass, because by God, you know I will. Hurry over to adfreeshows.com right now and sign up. And I thank you.
Do you remember at the time you were a Ted Turner employee then?
Yep.
Did it cause any waves or conversation, or hey, this could wipe out Vince, or any talk back in those days throughout that company, WCW, while this was going on?
Not that serious. I mean, it was discussed and it was a topic of conversation, but I don't think anybody thought that it was going to wipe the business out or something like that.
Well, there's another big story at the time, and that's Lex Luger giving notice to WCW from The Observer. And this comes to us from Meltzer. Lex Luger officially gave notice to WCW that he'd be finishing up on this pay-per-view, Superbrawl II. Luger's 3-year contract with WCW expired in March of '93, but he's expected to be given a limited release, which would allow him to wrestle during the final year of his contract in Japan, but not in the U.S., which would legally put a block on his going to the WWF until the spring of '93. Luger isn't scheduled to work any house shows or television tapings for the remainder of this month. Dave said, I don't have details on February scheduling, although it was expected Luger wouldn't work any house shows except for Milwaukee, but would work some television tapings for shows that would air prior to the pay-per-view. This leads to the rumor, which, by the way, Vince has emphatically denied, that Luger was quitting his contract, which was estimated at $600,000 a year in base salary and $25,000 per pay-per-view event, to join the World Bodybuilding Federation for 1 year, and then have a shot or an angle to segue into the WWF. The most reliable story seems to be that Luger, who apparently has saved his money and certainly has made his money, is simply taking a year off to open a new gym, attempt to market and merchandise himself, and tend to his family. If Luger, who has said not to enjoy either the lifestyle or wrestling itself, and was said to be only doing it because he was making good money from the start, does want to return, he may be able to strike himself an excellent deal in 1993. Clearly, the WWF needed a top babyface to carry the load, and Hogan's days seem to be numbered, working even the partial schedule he does now. So, JR, when do you hear about this whole Luger giving his notice and his contract? Are you surprised, shocked, dismayed? When do you hear about all this?
A little surprised. It was creatively done, so that all the legal issues could be addressed. So Luger, being a member of the WBF, got him on WWF network television, but it didn't get him. He's not on the wrestling show. He's not wrestling. So I thought that was a pretty clever way of getting around the issue.
So in your estimation, that was the long-term strategy. Vince already had that set in place. We'll have him come join the WBF, but our plan is to turn him into a WWF wrestler under contract at some point.
Of course.
Yeah.
Why else would you? Because the WBF wasn't going to make it. I think people on the inside knew that it was on shaky legs, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to get Luger past that 1 year so that he could start performing in the ring as a wrestler for WWF at a reasonable time. And I thought they had a nice plan. It worked out pretty good for Lex, and I got there in '93 as well, so I was up to speed on all that stuff.
Well, Dave Meltzer would go on to write regarding Super Brawl, which we're here. This puts the 229 pay-per-view show in an interesting position. Clearly, more people are going to know the finish of the main event than any pay-per-view in WCW history. And so there you go. Although in reality, who didn't know the finishes at the past several WrestleManias? This is Dave in his narrative. When in number 4, it was printed ahead of time in the WWF's own magazine. In number 6, it was an AP article that ran ahead of time in newspapers around the country. And in number 7, you'd have to have been brain defective not to know.
Yeah.
So do you think this hurts or helps the buy rate, Jim?
I don't think it hurt a thing. I think we're overthinking it if we do. Oh, I didn't want to, you know that the matches are predetermined. They're all predetermined. So why would you fixate on one? I mean, it's either got to go one way or the other. Either Lex is going to win or Lex is going to lose. It's pretty simple. They're not going to go into a time limit draw. So it was, well, as usual on some of these mainline items, it was a little overthought.
And, I think about it from a fan's perspective. So say I know Luger's leaving. Oh, cool. I'll get to see Sting win the belt then. This is going to be fun, so it might attract more attention.
Could be. It could have.
So you just don't know.
No, it's just hard to say, but it wasn't a big deal, yay or nay, quite frankly.
Speaking of turmoil in WCW around this time, Meltzer would write that World Championship Wrestling Executive Vice President Jim Herd resigned that Wednesday from the TBS organization after losing what appears to have been a him or me go struggle with Booker Dusty Rhodes. While it has been reported as a resignation, and technically it was, WCW overseer Jack Petrick apparently asked Herd to take a non-wrestling position in TBS syndication on Wednesday. Herd turned down the switch, offered his resignation, and by week's end had moved from Atlanta, where he'd been residing during the week, to his full-time home in St. Louis. JR, did you see this all happening?
Well, he was miserable. He's frustrated. So did I see it coming on that timeline? Probably not. But eventually it was inevitable that Herd was going to take a leave of absence or leave that position. He wasn't happy, and he wasn't a young spring chicken, and he was very frustrated more often than not. Probably didn't deserve that much frustration, but nonetheless, you knew at some point in time that the buzzer was going to sound for his exit.
He made the comment in there about Dusty. Do you think there's some truth in the comment that it was really over Dusty? Could it have been over the fact that Flair had left the company, a combination of both?
Oh, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It certainly wasn't, Dusty wasn't the main culprit. I don't think, in my view. So, no, I just, there were so many elements, he was getting pushed back from upper management. They want to get involved in booking. They want to get involved in how to market a pay-per-view and the themes and the vignettes. And then he's trying to babysit a bunch of guys that knew that they had the opportunity to kind of screw with the front office if they wanted to. So it was just a loose ship there, and he saw it getting away from him somewhat. So we all knew at some point in time he'd be walking, but none of us are sure when. Obviously, I probably had the closest relationship with Herd as anybody there, primarily because I lived there, and on those nights, it's like you mentioned on work nights, we'd go out and have a cocktail or have a steak or something. Because of all the booking committee guys, I was the only one that lived there, and I was available. So, and single. So I didn't have as big an issue with him as a lot of guys did. Herd gets blamed for so much shit that it's unfortunate. And I've never bought into that deal. You can't have that many problems and blame it all on one guy.
So JR, in your estimation, or what you're telling me is you had a good relationship with Jim Herd overall.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't agree with him all the time. We argued like cats and dogs. But yeah, I look, I had to work with the guy. And unlike a lot of the booking committee guys that come in for a meeting and then would bust their ass to get to Hartsfield Airport so they could make their flights home. That's kind of how I looked at that deal. He was in a tough spot, and he didn't have the product knowledge. He needed better support internally. And he didn't get a lot of his support mechanisms surrounding himself, the inner circle, the whatever you want to say.
Sure.
It was not doing him any favors.
Well, we're going to keep going here because there's a little bit more dirt here, if you will, a little more question and background here on the whole Jim Herd exodus. So Dave writes, while there's already been criticism of appointing another chief officer who has no pro wrestling background.
Big mistake.
Yeah, some feel Fry will handle the position better than Herd, who became well known within the office for his sometimes volatile personality. I'm hoping Kip knows enough to know he doesn't know anything, said one person associated closely with key WCW personalities. For 3 years, we've been watching this thing fall apart. Another WCW office employee said of Fry, he's a very intelligent person and not intimidating like Herd can sometimes be. The higher-ups were frustrated that the company couldn't turn a profit. Apparently, TBS ordered a report on the wrestling company after 3 years of heavy losses, thought to have been in the $19 million range. After top-to-bottom interviews with the company management, the report came out the Herd was a minus and was cited as not getting along with people. After the resignation, Herd reportedly went to a steering committee meeting and heavily blasted Dusty Rhodes, Jim Ross, and Magnum TA, although according to several reports, he praised Jim Crockett and said he felt sorry for him having to deal with the other three.
Wow.
According to those close with Herd, he said he felt like a tremendous weight had been lifted off his shoulders and that his job as WCW head was the hardest job he'd ever had, not in terms of workload, but in terms of pressure. Herd came down on Ross, Rhodes, and TA and blamed the Flair situation for ultimately doing him in. Herd apparently said that he felt Flair was the greatest wrestler that there ever has been, but his demands were too high, but that losing him was the biggest mistake he made, and that the company went downhill from there. Jim, I don't know where do we go from here? Where did it all go wrong?
Do I look like I'm concerned about that old ordeal you just read?
Not at all.
Dave wrote, Dave knows everything. God damn it. Dave can pick up the phone and get everything done. I didn't give a shit. He's leaving. Felt bad at the fact that he's leaving. But my checks came. I had a job, and that's all I was trying to protect was my job. I don't know what the hell he's even talking about, me being all these issues. All I did was tell him when some of his ideas were stupid and why they wouldn't work. And here's his idea to try. Things like that, but I never really cared. I learned a long time ago, Paul, and maybe others should think about this statement. Don't overthink things you can't change. You can't change something, then chill. Make it work or not. But if you can't change it, don't go crazy on it. So that's kind of how I looked at that deal. That place is so dysfunctional and so embarrassingly dysfunctional that sometimes you felt a little embarrassed just to walk down from the 12th floor to the food court at CNN Center and have lunch. Because you had that sensation that people from Turner are looking at you, and there's other them wrestling guys. They're losing a lot of money, all that stuff. So what are you going to do?
Right.
I'm sure most of them thought they could probably do a better job than we were doing. And hey, who the hell knows? Maybe they're right.
And that's exactly why I asked you, JR, because you had the relationship with him. You said it. I'd go out for cocktails with the guy. We had dinner. Yeah. We talked wrestling. Did we agree on everything? No. But here you go. Here's the writer, the dirt sheet writer, who's hearing it secondary from a phone call, to your point. Yeah. And that's why I want to ask you, because you were there. So you're going to be able to tell us if this makes sense to you or not. And it sounds like, whether it is true or not, that when you put your head to pillow at night, you always had felt like you had a solid relationship with Herd, and there wasn't necessarily all this issue. So.
Yeah, I didn't know he had that much animosity toward me. I know when Conrad did his interview with Herd a few months ago, that Herd was kind to me.
Complimentary.
In the interview,
yes.
and then We even had I don't know if they recorded it or not. We even had a nice, pleasant little conversation during the taping. So I think some of that shit's out. I think some of it is a little, and maybe people say, well, JR's covering his ass. Not really. The issue is that I think maybe Dave got some wrong information, and maybe Dave's assessment of this whole thing, because a lot of that information came from Flair. Flair and Dave are like a lot of us are friends. So I don't know. It's just at some point in your career, you really get tired of this shit. These things are really boorish, and I just can't get wrapped up in it. Not because I'm afraid of how it's going to make me feel mentally or whatever. No, I can't do anything about it. So
too much water under the bridge at this point.
Yeah, why spend all that time bitching and moaning and bemoaning and analyzing and all that stuff? I'm not going to do it. So, and I didn't do it. You get your feelings hurt and you think you're doing a good job, and people are talking about you behind your back, but that was the whole fallacy. The booking committee was a giant failure. Didn't make a shit who was on it. You can't have that many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody on the committee wanted to be the booker. Everybody on the committee wanted to be the top dog in that room. And, it's just crazy. So it wasn't a good time, quite frankly, for me. And the business was not fun, but you had a job and you go do your job and keep moving on.
There you go. Sounds like a giant cluster at the time. And so you have heard he's leaving. Ric Flair is now rising to the top of the World Wrestling Federation. He wins the WWF title at the Royal Rumble in 1992, which did you get a chance to happen around this time? Would you have checked out that Royal Rumble at that point in 92 when he won the WWF Championship, JR?
Unlikely. I don't remember watching it. I've seen plenty of footage on it since then, but I don't recall making a pointed effort to watch the event live. And that wasn't a stand. I wasn't holding out. I wasn't boycotting. I'll show you, I won't watch. I just have better things to do.
Sure.
How can you say that, JR?
You're not a wrestling fan? Are you? Yeah. I get it. I get it. You have a life too, and you got things to do. So, but I do want to put another plug in here, because last month, JR, we did a watch along over here at Ad Free Shows with Rick. He was on with Connie. Connie was out of the cabin, and my goodness, it was an unbelievable experience. And they watched it together, and fans they brought him in to ask questions while they all watched the match. So that was a fantastic time. Are you surprised, though, that Flair ascended to the top of the WWF as quick as he did with them?
No. What else would you do? Start him working with the Brooklyn Brawler and get a few wins? Oh, let's get you a few wins, Rick, so people can recognize who you are. No.
Right.
You'd be stupid to not use him in a top position if you had access to the talent. He still was considered the best, or this 1A of all the workers, and including the almighty Japanese, which I know is it's almost like blasphemy to some people in wrestling. And so no, I think that's the only thing he should have done with him. He should have been at the top, and that's just what you do with talents at his stature. You give him a chance to get over on top. And then he makes everybody else around him better. All the matches he has, no matter who it may be, they're going to be better matches because Flair is in them.
Well said. And we got to remember, too, as fans, creative was just a little better back in those days. All right, enough of that. Also at that show, and conspicuous by his absence, is Bret Hart. More from the Observer. One of the stranger stories of the past week involves the Intercontinental title. Officially, as the storyline goes, Bret Hart went to the ring with a 104-degree fever on Friday night, January 17th in Springfield, Massachusetts, and lost to the Mountie. Mountie, in turn, dropped the title at the Rumble 2 days later to Roddy Piper, As has become pretty common knowledge as the week went on, Hart had negotiated and at one point agreed to a deal where he would debut on Tuesday, January 21st at the Clash of the Champions for WCW in Topeka, where he'd come out with the Intercontinental title as something of a payback for the WWF bringing in Ric Flair and having him wear what WCW considered their world title belt. Of course, the situations are completely different in that Flair was fired by WCW after the company attempted to cut an existing contract almost in half, which somehow 6 months later WCW feels is the WWF's fault, to the extent they went to court over getting the belt off of WWF TV. So this idea was to gain revenge on the WWF, but the difference is that Hart would be walking out on a valid contract. JR, what do you remember about any of this?
Just, when I first heard that Bret may come to work for the company, I was very happy because I was a big Bret Hart fan, still am. And so I was excited about the possibilities, but I also was of the adage, and when dealing with WCW, you just had to go this way. I'll believe it when I see it. If it happens, we get a win, but it's not a guarantee no matter what, because Bret was very loyal, as we discussed here on the show, to Vince and the WWF, very loyal. And, he left under stress and all that stuff. No doubt about that when he finally left. But, and that didn't work out. When Bret finally went to WCW, it wasn't a great success. It really wasn't. So, I was leery. I was hopeful, but I was leery.
Well, we all know it doesn't work out. His contract rolled over. Do you remember if there were already plans in place or conversation for, hey, this is what we're going to do with Bret when he does show up for WCW? Do you remember if it got that far?
He was destined for a top spot. How you want to define the top spot, one would assume he'll be in the championship picture sooner than later. That's how I would have used him. He'd have become champion at some point. But I don't know that we ever got even close to ascertaining where his booking was going to be. One would assume, just using common sense and logic, that he'd be at the top of the card and working with the top guys and making all of them that he worked with better.
My goodness, the armchair quarterback in me says how different things would have been with Bret Hart in WCW back in this time. Could have been strange.
Yeah, it would have been great. It would have been great, and he would have been a great help and a stabilizing factor, solid building block to rebuild the company. But it just didn't materialize.
So much news around this time, JR. I can't, as we go through this together, it's just incredible. Now we have Jesse the Body Ventura. He debuts for WCW at the Clash of Champions, and it's called the most lucrative single event announcing deal in the history of pro wrestling. What did you think of bringing in Jesse, and were you excited to work with him?
No, I wasn't excited to work with him, which was my mistake. Jesse was a little bit full of himself, as was I. When I found out what he made, which is about double what I made, and I'm doing like 3 shows, I wasn't overwhelmed with that. And I told Kip Fry that. I said, these numbers get out, we all get the bottom line. And for some of us that are competitive, it's not good. I wish I'd have never known what he was earning. So I was making like 150 or 200, maybe, about 150, somewhere thereabouts, 150 grand a year. And I think he was making 350. I didn't understand that.
Doing less than you, way less than you, probably.
Well, he made double what I made.
I'm talking as far as workload, though, too. He made double.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did 1 show and then a pay-per-view every now and then. But I didn't work well with him in the beginning. And that's my fault. That's not Jesse's fault. And he and I discussed this. And he's appreciative of the fact that I admitted the error of my ways. And but we had the potential to be really good. And if I hadn't had such a chip on my shoulder and all that, we probably would have been really good.
Well, that Clash of the Champions would tie for the worst rating in the history of the Clash. It's a good show. It features the Steiners beating Vader and Mr. Hughes. You got Dustin and Ron Simmons and Barry Windham defeating Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zabisco in the main event. And you have Sting and Ricky Steamboat defeating Rick Rude and Steve Austin. It's a who's who of talent. But it's just it's loaded. Not a lot in the way of storylines, but what do you remember of working with Ventura that first time at that Clash?
Is that the one where Liger and Pillman wrestled?
That's going to be this show here in Superbrawl that we're going to cover.
I don't know. I was not real high on, as I said, Jesse's personality rubbed me a little bit wrong, and I'm sure mine did him as well. And again, most of that's on me, my jealousy and insecurity that the wrestling business breeds. And so, my whole attitude toward Jesse from then until now has changed 180% or degrees.
Well, from the Observer, Ventura will be announcing, but no official word on whether it'll be Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone or both that he'll be working with. And yes, there are political forces at work that make it very possible, if not likely, that it won't be Jim Ross.
Yeah, how about that? Ooh, drama, the dirt. What did Dave say? God damn it, Paul. What did Dave say? Shit. Give me a break.
Who's playing politics here? I mean, what's going on? What's happening? Give us the dirt, JR.
Politics of what? There's politics all the time in wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're looking. I don't know where I am on this topic right now.
Well, the question is, who do you think Meltzer's talking about here and trying to play politics and not have you do the show with Jesse? Who would be playing that political game? I mean,
whoever's in charge.
Kip Fry, potentially.
Kip Fry loved my work. So I don't know. I think maybe more over the years has been made out of the Paul than there really is, quite honestly. It's a great story. We got Dave material we can use. That's all cool. But come on, it's so long ago, and at the end of the day, how much difference did it really make on anybody's career? Think about that. Very little, hardly a ripple.
We call this segment "Digging into the Dirt with Dave." You like that? Digging into the dirt with Dave?
No,
not a fan. Marvel Comics shuts down Arachnaman, so Brad Armstrong is back to being Brad Armstrong. I guess no one saw that coming. This is an interesting note in the Observer after Hurd leaves. Morale and enthusiasm within the organization is the highest it's been in a long time.
He did a survey. Dave did a survey, see, and it was very thought out, and that's why he knows for sure that the attitude and the morale had improved a great deal. For those of us who are actually there, the only thing it eliminated was Hurd's rants and some of his decision making. Other than that, it was business as usual.
There you go, straight from JR's mouth there. House show business had picked up, with most shows doing in the mid $20,000 range, 2,000 to 3,000 people, with most crediting it to the Sting versus Rick Rude headline feud. It will be interesting because Rude's limited date contract will probably run out over the summer as much as they're booking him now, and rumor has it he'll be demanding a big raise to stay. And one figures, given the way the game is being played right now, that Titan will be making a big play for Rude. JR, what did you think was different about Sting versus Rude? Is pushing someone like Rude when his contract is coming up an issue for bookers?
Well, you would think that they had a plan to re-sign him. But the fact that Rude was one of the great heels of that generation, can't be said enough. So he was a great opponent for Sting. They had good chemistry. They looked good in the match, looked good in the poster. And Rick was just a great heel. So, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that other than, if Vince sees that Rude is back in game shape and ready to rock and roll, that's where Rude's going to go. Everybody still wanted to play in WWE or WWF. Everybody still wanted to go there because the money was perceived to be much better. And the notoriety you get from being there, et cetera, much like today. People believe that, once you're branded with the WWE label, that you're more valuable. And that's probably true in some cases, but I don't think it's true in all cases. But I think that's where we were with that. I think, Rude was just a star. And if Vince has got a chance to scoop up a star, that's what he's going to do.
Tickets would go on sale for Super Brawl, and it has a $30,000 open with the Mecca Arena and holding 6,000 people, and it's going to sell out. That has to be encouraging news to see that.
Yeah, it was. It was that. Anytime the word sellouts put into a sentence that you're involved in, it's nice. So, but there was a renewed interest in the product. The fans could sense and understood through online stuff and so forth that, things are changing. And it's just that we never tapped into that momentum to any degree to build on it. You had a few, those one-off successes. This sold out, that sold out. This did pretty good. But other than that, it was all kind of a temporary feel-good situation.
Well, JR, around this time, there's also a buzz of talent that could be available and the WCW may have interest in. And this is Steve Dr. Death Williams, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Junkyard Dog, Marty Jannetty, and Shane Douglas potentially joining WCW. Are you pushing for Dr. Death and Gordy, and are the others, or are these all kind of separate discussions? Do you remember some of these guys' names floating around out there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Here's the deal. Dr. Death and Bam Bam were considered one of the best tag teams in the world. Even Dave likes them because they wrestle in Japan all the time.
That's right.
They could pick it up Japanese to order dinner. So that's all it takes, apparently. But these guys are studs, and my vision was them and the Steiners. That's where I thought was the money at some point in time when it's built right. I'm trying to think who else on that short list, but Doc and Gordy were very prominent, and they wanted to come in and lessen their trips abroad, so both of them were married and had young families and so forth. And I just thought they were going to be great for us, and they were great for us. We just didn't have enough time on them to build a continuing story, but no, they're phenomenal. They were just phenomenal for us, and we loved them. We loved them having them around, and the talents liked them. They were serious, but they were fun-loving, sometimes too fun-loving, but they were serious about their craft, and they didn't ever go out there and call shit in and lock up like an old woman. They were real, and and we wanted to rebuild with reality-based television, athletic reality-based TV. That's always everybody's goal. Until it doesn't work, because a lot of folks don't know how to book it.
JR, there's a name on that list that I just want to ask you about. You and I haven't had a conversation about him before, but I'm curious your opinion because I became a big fan of him in his run with ECW because he got to be himself and he had some fire skills on the mic, and that was Shane Douglas. He never hit it big in the big two. And when I say big, I mean main event level. What are your thoughts around talent evaluation around Shane Douglas?
He was a very talented kid and high IQ, smart guy, good worker. But sometimes Shane could be his own worst enemy. And the things he would say in private that weren't really private, things of that nature, hurt him a little bit. His own I don't know if you want to say you can do the nice side of saying, well, he had a lot of passion and he couldn't control it, or he didn't have he wasn't using logic when he was thinking about some of these things he was going to say. But Shane Douglas did not make it there because he wasn't a good worker. He's a very good worker, but he had an affinity for the politics and all that shit, and it hurt him, quite frankly. But he had all the tools that he needed to be a star. And I wish he'd have made it because he's another guy that's a solid worker, could work with anybody, could be a baby face, could be a heel, always looked good. So, but sometimes, as I said, he was his own worst enemy. And he had very little patience at times for his push. because I don't know what Dave said about the push, but there's got to be something out there.
And to wrap up that point, he was also one of those guys when they gave him the mic and he could be himself. He made you feel, which I feel like is so critical. Guys like that do it, that can make you feel something, make you want to care. That's the wrestlers that I want to get invested in. So it's unfortunate in that regard with Shane, but always a talented performer.
No doubt.
From the Observer, it says, just days after the Florida state legislature voted down the bill to implement steroid testing of pro wrestlers, World Championship Wrestling Executive Vice President Kip Fry announced the promotion would be announcing an anti-steroid policy within the next week. No details about the policy were available at press time, but it will include wrestlers making public service anti-steroid promos on television. Hopefully Fry, who is a newcomer to the wrestling world, will realize that the touchiness involved in this issue and not try to have wrestlers who have achieved the spotlight partially through the use of steroids to then make statements that give one the impression they would never touch the stuff. Fry also said in comments for this coming Sunday's Miami Herald that WCW would be instituting a policy to post signs in front of arenas when advertised talent isn't going to appear. What did you think of this move by Kip and the policy itself, JR?
Well, the move on the steroids, I've already stated my opinion on that. It's much to do about nothing. If they're getting high on morphine or they're doing cocaine or they're on prescription meds, then I get that. But that wasn't the case. And Kip was a lawyer by trade, and he was in over his head. He's within an area of his practice that he wasn't versed in, quite frankly. So Kip Fry was a nice guy. He had a cabin up north of Atlanta, up on one of those lakes. And we'd go up there on Fridays. I remember, and we'd meet at his house. Had a great house on the lake, and we would go over TV and direction and try to get some television written and all these things. And that was always, Dusty was there a lot, Shivani and I. And I remember we ate it. There's a little place in Dawsonville. That's where it was. And that's, of course, the hometown of Bill Elliott, the NASCAR driver. Bill from Dawsonville. And
now you got me looking up Dawsonville, Georgia, because this sounds like an amazing place on a lake, a cabin.
Dawsonville is, we had a restaurant, not even a restaurant, the Greasy Spoon. That went to the same place every week for lunch. And it was great. It's a little ma and pa thing. But through all those meetings, we all got to know Kip Fry better. I never had any issues with him. The only issue I had with him or anybody else in that role is, why are you hired in this position without the product knowledge required to make it successful? And it wasn't a front against the guy. It just, you got some people get put in roles that they're not qualified to be in. And I think that's where you found Kip would fit in that little notch. So, but Kip tried awful hard to, he had a thing where he would give out MVP awards and cash for outstanding performance on television. I think one of the first guys to win it was Brian Pillman. So he tried to do things that were talent friendly, and it's just, you find out if the money's great if I get some of it. But if Pillman got the money, how come I didn't get the money? I had a better match than he did. It's just start the shit.
It sounded like though he was trying. He was trying.
Oh, absolutely, he was trying.
Yeah.
He was definitely trying, and I admire that. But he just didn't. He had not been around a lot of athletes and con men and flawed thespians, insecure individuals. He found the good in everybody without looking a little deeper to find out what they really were all about. And so, but I always enjoyed working with Kip. He was fine. And he started understanding it a little bit better. He started listening to people a little bit more. So I had no issues with Kip Fry, none at all.
Well, JR, around this time, more news, and unfortunately, this isn't good news. Buzz Sawyer passed away on February the 7th.
Yeah.
What is Buzz's legacy in the business in your mind?
Wasted talent. Too much partying. One hell of a worker. I called some matches between he and Jim Duggan in Mid-South UWF at times. They were just out of this world because they enjoyed literally beating the shit out of each other. And Buzz was as good a heel feeding a comeback or a motivated babyface as anybody I ever saw. It's absolutely amazing. If people get a chance to watch some of the Buzz Sawyer stuff from that era, you'll see some of the bumps he takes, and he made Jim Duggan a legend because they just whipped each other's ass, and it was so believable. But Buzz is just a talent that his vices destroyed his career, and that's just too damn bad because he was really a big time talent.
It's unfortunate. Talking about, we were just talking about some talent that you were also looking at. There's some talent that you have and you're making some decisions on in WCW. So Missy Hyatt agrees to a new 2-year contract around this time.
Yeah.
Nikita Koloff was inked this past week here as we talk about this show to return as a top singles babyface, teaming with Sting and company against the Dangerous Alliance. Also expected to be headed in are Greg Valentine and Dick Slater as a heel tag team. Meltzer made the comment, though, Lord only knows why they would bring them in. Scott Norton is supposed to be coming in as well, apparently as a babyface between Japan tours. There's also talk of signing, here we go, Big Van Vader to an exclusive full-time deal and having him give up his international commitments and push him as one of the lead group of heels against Sting. But given his sweet Japan deal, which was estimated at $200,000 per year for 12 weeks of work, it'll take a major financial commitment, one would think. So a lot, as Conrad would say, to unpack. Let's talk about Missy first. Isn't really doing too much on television. Did you think she needed a new contract in your mind at this point?
Well, she had a lot of television time, and she had developed a lot of name identity. And it wasn't the fact that we were overrun with female personalities. All of a sudden, it's going to just become a good old boys club. So she brought something unique to the presentation. So yeah, she understood the business probably better than a lot of the guys, honestly. That ditzy blonde thing was pretty good work. She's pretty smart.
It had its own appeal, so it was something different, to your point.
Yeah, and we did a lot of wraparound television. In other words, stuff in the studio where we pitched to pieces and pitched to matches, and those were controlled, so I could help her with that. And I worked with her a lot in that regard. So, but yeah, I think she always added something to the unique to the mix because, again, we didn't have anybody like her.
Let's move on to Nikita. He comes back. Is that a Dusty decision, or how does that all come together?
Well, I'm sure if Dusty was involved in decision making, and I'm so confused about where we are, who was in charge, who the booker was, who was or wasn't. Jesus Christ, I can't even remember all the players in that respect. But I'm sure if Nikita came back, he did come back. But when he came back, I'm sure it was influenced by Dusty. And look, it was a good hire. I mean, he looked great. He is over. He had a audience, built-in audience, and he was young. Good call, a good hire.
He's got that immediate name brand. To your point, if you're a fan of WCW or NWA, you immediately know who Nikita is, and you're going to want to watch him wrestle, see if he still can sickle people's heads off. So there you go. We don't talk a lot about Scott Norton, but was he just built for more Japan than America in your estimation? What are your thoughts on Scott?
I think he was very happy working part-time in that physical style in Japan. He seemed to be more content with his Japanese bookings. He just got and that's Doc and Gordy to a certain degree were in the same position. They got accustomed to those trips, and how the businesses run there and how they were booked. So Scott was a big rugged son of a gun. He would have been a great heel for Sting if we got him in long enough to get him over and get a story started. He's a very impressive, intimidating heel. So at least we were looking for people that had some skill sets and that were somewhat new to our audience. So I don't think Scott was around long.
He would end up coming back in for the NWO, being part of the New World Order years later. But again, never made that main event level tier. Let's talk about Vader. That's what I want to talk about. How expensive was it for him to come in, be full-time, and give up that sweet, as Conrad says, Japan money? Because that's a nice deal he had going over there.
Yeah. I think Leon was in the $300K range. He make it a good living because we knew we had to pay him maybe a little bit more than some of the other heels because of his background, the fact that he was such an attraction, that big head thing and all that. His presentation was very good, and he wasn't as, if I had gotten Leon in WWE at this time when he was not all beat up and shoulders and knees and back and all these things, when we got him here in this run, as it applies to this show, he was he was healthy, pretty healthy, and did a hell of a job. So, and Leon wanted to create more of a marketing base in America as well, and not have to take so many long flights. Flying, people don't understand. It's a daunting thing to fly internationally that much at that size. Even if you got your boss to fly you first class, it's still 10 hours or whatever on a plane, and you're still 400 pounds, and it's just tough as hell. So, but I was really glad. I was always a big fan of Leon's, and it's just, unfortunately, timing is an issue at certain times of your career. But I was always high on Leon. I thought Leon and Sting was big money.
You're absolutely right. It was from his presentation, the whole helmet gear, the music that he came down, that, and you and I have talked about this before. Music's a big deal. And when they had the music lined up for him, the presentation, the smoke shooting out of that mask, that huge, I don't even know what to call that thing. The thing was amazing, that headdress situation. But he had it in the ring. He could go. Big man, athletic, doing moonsaults. I mean, incredible athlete. It's amazing to think what he could have done, like you said, in the WWE back in those days. But here we go. More news. The DEA raids the WWF locker room in St. Louis looking for steroids, but finds nothing. Again, I'm not even going to ask you about this, but there's a lot of shockwaves that I guess are running rampant through the business. Dave chimes in here. He's got.
Stop it. Okay, go ahead.
He says this past Wednesday, Atlanta television channel WSB TV. There you go. I'm sure you're familiar with that old channel too. That's the station radio that my radio show was on. That's right. That's right.
You can hear every Friday. It drops on the ad-free network.
That's right. Those audio tapes. They're very good. Our third plug for AFS. This past Wednesday, Atlanta television channel WSB did a 6-minute documentary alleging racial discrimination in World Championship Wrestling. WBS puts its top investigative reporter on the piece and talked about a complaint filed from the EEOC from a former WCW wrestler charging racial discrimination. The piece claimed that the average black wrestler under contract at WCW earned $104,000 per year, while the average white wrestler earned $205,000 a year. I can almost certainly dispute those numbers because the only black wrestlers I know of currently under contract are Ron Simmons, and his contract is right about the $200,000 range, and right. Mr. Hughes, who I'd guess is between $78,000 and $104,000. They showed a tape of Johnny B. Bad and pointed out that he and PN News are white men who are pretending to be black men. Mr. Hughes was interviewed and said he didn't feel he was discriminated against and said he was happy. Because of EEOC and NAACP pressure being put on by a few ex-black wrestlers that have worked for WCW, although nobody will admit it, That pressure is probably why WCW is bringing back Junkyard Dog and putting Teddy Long, who, by the way, who's been under contract all along but hasn't been used, in a new position as color commentator of the syndicated main event show with Eric Bischoff, which runs in very few markets, but will be only WCW's syndicated show that airs in Atlanta, where all the heat is. Wow, how serious is this all taken by Turner, JR?
Well, they took it very seriously because they're afraid of the EEOC or whatever the hell it is. I don't know. The DEA had better things to do. I mean, really, the DEA. Oh, we'll invade the locker room.
Yeah, that St. Louis story. Yeah.
Yeah, shit. So, but they didn't find anything. So, okay, what's that mean? You know, does it mean that nobody was using them? I don't think so. So, it's just one of those dog chasing its tail things. It's around and around and around. It's like it's the old dog chasing a car. What's going to happen when the dog catches the car? Nothing.
Right. Nothing.
It's just silly shit. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now is this drug thing that was so overthought. It was almost ludicrous.
And then we got into the other story, and they already pulled out examples of people that weren't even matching. Ron Simmons, $200,000 a year, doing well. He ends up becoming world champion. So just interesting times for sure in the business as we go through some of this. Let's get on to the Superbrawl card. It began at 11 matches, and it's pared down to 8 as we get closer to the show. From the Observer, Gordon Solie was taken off the WNN segment and replaced with Eric Mannequin Bischoff. Solie's only role left is doing the localized promos for Florida cities. This is funny here. Why was Gordon getting relegated to this at this point in his career? Mannequin Bischoff.
Age.
Yeah.
Age and his drinking. Being reliable. I got Gordon back in the game. But not without some degree of planning. In other words, we had to have Gordon's things that he recorded were done first thing in the morning, like at 8 o'clock before he started drinking. And it was sad. And I went out on a limb. I thought he deserved a better exit than he got originally. And I had a lot of respect for Gordon. He was a big influence in my career, still is. So, you know, but age, they can't say that, you know, but I think that's the fact. And if they were just worried about Gordon not showing up or you know, but that's why we put him in a situation where he was always on tape. We could control what he said and how he said it. If his speech was slurred, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so the first time I brought him in there, I remember he had a few cocktails at the Crown, the Delta Lounge. When he came in from Tampa to Atlanta, he had to have a few cocktails because there's free drinks in the Crown Room. I don't know what it's called now, maybe it's called something else, but it's their club and free vodka for all. So he had a few cocktails, and when he came to work, you know, Keith Mitchell called me and said, "We got a little problem with Gordy." I said, "Okay, I'll be down there." So I went down and he was shit-faced. So we were in the Omni, so we just got him a room, told him that the taping is postponed because of some other reason, not the fact you're drunk and you can't do your job. I'm not going to castrate a guys for that. It was wrong. I wasn't trying to, but it was just hard to all these personalities and all these different agendas were getting to be silly, quite frankly. So, but Gordon did fine. He wrote his own copy. We approved it. We gave him the topics and little bullet points. He did his little thing and on teleprompter, and off we went. But we realized that he takes the first flight out of Tampa, comes straight to the studio, and we do his work.
Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting here to see that there was the loving relationship between Dave Meltzer and Eric Bischoff started way back here in 1992.
Yeah.
The mannequin. Dustin Rhodes, Steve Austin, Brian Pillman, and Johnny B. Bad all get new contracts. Wow,
Yep.
Listen to those names. Dustin Rhodes, Steve Austin, Pillman, Johnny B. Bad. Were you part of any or all of these negotiations, JR?
I had input on all of them. And a lot of times it was, JR, what do you think about Johnny B. Bad? Can we make something out of this guy? And my answer would be, give him time. It might click. He's not a top guy right now, but he's got a top guy look and a top guy gimmick. Austin all along I thought was going to be huge. And that kind of worked out. But all those guys are keepers. Dustin, hell, I'm amazed to watch Dustin sporadically wrestle for AEW now and shocked at how good he still is. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, it is. It really is. And of course, Brian was Brian and nobody else like him. And he had great chemistry with Austin. And so we found out that putting them together would keep them both half-assed sane. They enjoyed each other's company. And they enjoyed the fact that there was no dominant tag team, so they were getting a chance to run with the ball a little bit. But all those are good signings.
Well, we got to give the devil his due, JR. It's that time because he got it right here, him and his readers. You're named best play-by-play announcer by the Observer readers for 1991.
Yeah.
Does that title mean anything to you at this point?
Of course, yeah. Anytime you get an award that's voted on by fans, you can't just walk away from it and say, oh, it doesn't mean anything, it's wrestling. Well, how about those checks you're cashing? That's wrestling too. How about your exposure on television every week? That's wrestling too. So yeah, it meant something. Excalibur won it last year. I told him the other day, I was just kidding him. I congratulated him and I said, I think you only got to win 15 more to tie me.
I love it. Keep him humble, JR.
Well, he's done a good job. He's a smart guy and he's trying awful hard. I'm not I've never understood why we have a masked announcer.
I was going to say, do you think he'll keep that forever?
I don't know. Forever is a long time, Paul, but I think he'll.
As long as he announces. Let me rephrase it.
I would think that's where it's headed. You know, and whether I like it or not, it doesn't matter.
That's just
he does a good job. He's really detail oriented. He prepares like nobody else. I always say, you know, he's generally the smartest guy in the room when it comes to a lot of these things.
Great voice, sounds good.
Yeah,
knows the moves.
Guy, and a real Mark is a great guy. So, but yeah, I appreciated those getting a win every now and then on the Meltzer deal.
Yeah,
because it was kind of a close fraternity. For years, it was Lance, Gordon, and then I kind of come on the scene.
The game changer.
Well,
you were, Jim. You were a game changer, my friend.
I was in the right place at the right time more often than not, but yeah, it means something.
Different level of excitement.
I have my fun kidding and prodding Dave. Dave's been a friend of mine for 30 years. Do I put as much stock in it now as I did then? Probably not. And it's easy to say, well, you say that, Gerald, because you're not winning the award anymore. And but even Meltzer told me himself, maybe last year, he said it's just a whole different voting group. They're a different demographic. And the smart marks, as they are called, really have gravitated toward Excalibur. And I get it. That's fine.
Yeah.
He does a hell of a job. He's on our team. I think he and I and Shivani do a hell of a job.
Fantastic.
So, and it's not easy to do a 3-man booth, but I love working with him. And, but he's really good. But anyway, I always appreciate those awards. It's just it's a win. It's a win, Paul. You know, it worked for me.
Good.
It gave me a little satisfaction that somebody's noticing my work.
Somebody's recognizing you for what you're doing, your effort. Absolutely.
That's right.
There you go. Well, we've made it, Jim. We're here. It's Super Brawl 2 live from Milwaukee, and I'm going to do it right. We're going to play this awesome little intro clip. Here we go.
Tonight, the World Light Heavyweight title is on line when Japan's Jushin Thunder Liger defends his title against Flying Brian. The World Tag Team titles at stake when the Steiners go head-to-head against Arn Anderson and Beautiful Bobby. The United States Heavyweight title is challenged when Ravishing Rick Rude battles Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And the World Heavyweight title match, the total package Lex Luger against his former best friend Sting. Live from the Mecca in Milwaukee, it's Super Brawl 2.
There we are, JR, live from the Mecca in Milwaukee. We're all excited. We're fired up, and we're ready to go. The feedback to the show is overwhelmingly positive. The Meltzer Observer readers, 89.5% thumbs up.
Yeah.
This time frame is never really thought of being one of the highlights for WCW, but this show really is just a hell of a card, and we're going to run through it together. A few notes here before we kick off the matches. From the Observer. It says, a lot of people expected Super Brawl on Saturday, February 29th from Milwaukee to be the show of the year. While it was a virtual consensus that it was a good show, somehow expectations were so high that it didn't quite live up to the card of the year mark. Still, there was a legitimate match of the year contender on the show, and most of the matches were good. The main event, in which Sting defeated Lex Luger to win the championship for a second time, was a letdown for a pay-per-view main event, let alone a major world title change match. Preliminary figures we've received as of Monday indicated a buy rate around 0.6, which if it holds up nationally has to be a terrible disappointment. While legitimately some of this can be blamed on the increase in price from $19.95 to $24.95, one can't blame a fall in purchases by almost half from Starrcade on that. Part of it has to be attributed to the main event not garnering enough interest. Considering on paper, this looked to be a great card, and with the debut of Jesse the Body Ventura thrown in, it says there's still a long way to go, being 1 month before a WrestleMania priced at $29.95. Wow, remember those days when WrestleMania was $29.95? But they've run pay-per-view shows 1 month before Mania every year and always have done decent business. If the 0.6 holds up, that would be around a $2.35 million total gross. Jim, do you remember the pay-per-view buy rate being a disappointment at all?
Not really, not specifically, Paul. It's just there's too much on my plate and everybody else's plate, quite frankly, to worry about things you can't control. The buy rate's in. Here's how it was received. This is how many people bought it. So not really. It's just time to move on. We got more shows to do.
Understood. Well, it is a full house, Jim. 4,000 fans paid for a $67,000 house. Coming so soon after Herd resigns, it has to show something that the company is doing right, you would imagine. Things seem to be moving well so far without Herd, right?
Yeah, it was progressing. It was progressing, and there was an attitude change. Herd had alienated so many people on the roster that his departure seemed to take that dark cloud and move it out of the way so you could see some sunshine.
Well, Jim, the show opens with what many call one of the all-time great matches, and it's Pillman pinning Liger in 16 minutes, 58 seconds to regain the WCW light heavyweight title. Pillman was legit working against doctor's orders because of a back injury. There were so many hot moves in this match that you couldn't even remember them all. But there were dives out of the ring, hot moves in the ring, unique submissions, and all kinds of hot moves like powerbombs, superplexes off the top rope, German suplexes, and the like for near falls, which popped the crowd like it was Japan. There's the Japan reference.
Yeah.
For the most part, the crowd cheered both men. There was a USA, USA chant when Liger had Pillman in the figure four, but almost immediately, Liger did a somersault splash off the top rope to the floor, which got the crowd chanting, Jushin, Jushin. Dave says, I sensed there was a solid percentage of the crowd that wanted to boo Liger going in, but they couldn't. Anyway, describing it doesn't do it justice. If you didn't see it, get a videotape. Well, you can watch it on Peacock now. Finish saw Liger miss a diving headbutt off the top rope, and Pillman pin him with a Japanese rolling crotch hold. Yes, that was the
What?
name. Yeah.
A rolling crotch hold.
A Japanese rolling. Break that out on Dynamite. Is that the Japanese rolling crotch hold?
Excalibur would know that.
Liger handed Pillman the belt, and both guys hugged after the match to a huge ovation, and the crowd heavily cheered both men when they left the ring. 4 3/4 stars. I don't even know if there's words for this match, Jim. And the fact that Pillman has this match against doctor's orders,
Yeah.
are you surprised Liger didn't do more in the States?
No, he loved, Liger was a fixture in Japan, so his visits to the States are sporadic and had to be well timed. So we never expected to get dates on Liger. He came in to put the title back on Bryan, and that was pretty much his lot. It's his assignment. But we knew we weren't going to get regular dates on him. We were only hoping that when people saw him that they would enjoy his work, and they did, and that when we book him on another big show, it would have an impact and have a meaning. So, but he was a swell guy to work with, and again, it's one of the big time hot legends in the business at that point in time. He was a major star. So, and so innovative, creative. And Bryan loved that because Bryan was so athletic and he loved that style. And Bryan was a student of a lot of the Japanese stuff. So, it was a great match, and it was the way to start the show off. People said, well, how are we supposed to follow that? Well, by working your ass off. Are you saying that you're not a good enough worker to follow the opening match? So, guys make excuses.
Well, let's talk about how this one got followed up, because it wasn't so hot. It was Marcus Alexander Bagwell pinning Terrence Taylor in 7 minutes, 36 seconds. Taylor was wearing a Ted DiBiase hand-me-down outfit. You had to pity these guys because there was no way to follow the previous match. This is Meltzer again. Taylor carried Bagwell completely. I'm not even going to read the rest of what he wrote here. Bagwell got lost going into the rolling reverse cradle, and the pin was heavily booed, and the place cheered when Taylor hit him with the 5-arm after the match. 1.5 stars. That's a tough one to follow, though, JR.
I don't know why Taylor did the honors. I never did really figure that one out. But Terry a lot of people had lost confidence in Terry. Again, Terry's one of those guys that sometimes needed to keep his mouth shut, and he didn't always do that. So he could be his own worst enemy, like a lot of guys we've talked about in this business. So, yeah, he was. I didn't understand that finish. It was what it was, and it was 7 minutes long. So you could drink warm piss for 7 minutes and survive. So 7 minutes ain't gonna kill nobody.
It sounds like that's what they did during this one. Once you digested your piss, if you came back in time, match 3 was Ron Simmons pinning Cactus Jack. With a cross body block off the top rope, which turned into a power slam. 6 minutes, 33 seconds. Cactus took a few frightening bumps. Imagine that. The first one being hanging himself in the ropes. I can't believe this man's still alive, JR. He also did an elbow drop off the middle rope to the floor. After that match, Abdullah the Butcher did a run-in to apparently attack Jack. But lo and behold, he attacked Simmons instead, and they doubled on Simmons until here he comes, JYD, out of the audience and headbutted a few security guards and made the save. You would be shocked at the pop JYD got with the fans chanting his name. He's dropped 61 pounds, although when your starting point is 346, that means there's still about 15 to 20 left to go, Dave. He gave this 2.5 stars. And this is one of the more underrated matches of Cactus's career. JYD debuting here, it's a big deal, but he's past his prime here, but still, he's still going to get the pop. He has the name recognition, trying to get in good shape. What do you think of this one, JR?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised at the ovation, the pop that JYD received. We were hoping that maybe we could find a little lightning in the bottle with JYD on a limb. Keep his matches short, let him do his power moves, sell, come back, go home. And we thought on that night, there was hope that could occur. But, he didn't control his weight. JY didn't have the fire that he used to have and all those things. He was kind of burned out, which is too bad because he had an opportunity there to make some serious money. It just didn't materialize. But Ron Simmons showed that he was a future star. Cactus Jack is Cactus Jack. Nobody like him. So that match was not a failed experiment. And so they, like you said, they got 2.5 stars, and that was probably surprising to some people.
It sounds like it's from even reading Dave's synopsis here, it's an entertaining match. You get the return of Junkyard Dog. You get a big pop for that. You get some, again, crazy Cactus Jack moves that he shouldn't have been doing. Probably regrets right now as he sits wherever he sits. But he is quite the talent here now. We're getting into Ron Simmons. We're getting into Cactus. Now I'm going to talk about a couple guys here. Maybe not so much in match 4. But before I get there, Jesse the Body Ventura makes a comment. He says, regarding Tom Zinke and Van Hammer, there's no money in bodybuilding. I mean, this has got to be a little bit well-timed for the WBF, don't you think?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it is. It's all about that. And Jesse loved that kind of thing, saying the outlandish, inflammatory remarks. But he's just Jesse being Jesse. You know, it wasn't like we weren't where he's going to take a shot here and there. And nobody cared. It was not a controversial issue internally. So that's what he was there for, just to create some controversy and say some outlandish things.
Doing his job exactly right. So then you have Tom Zinke and Van Hammer. They would defeat Vinny Vegas, who we've now come to all know and love as Kevin Nash, and Richard Morton, the more refined Ricky Morton, in 12 minutes when Zinke pinned Morton with a sunset flip coming out of the corner. Zinke was subbing for Johnny B. Bad, who was embroiled in a contract dispute and pulled from the card at the last minute. Morton replaced Mr. Hughes with the cover, reason being that it would make it a better match, but actually Hughes was pulled from the show as punishment for some kind of non-drug-related misdeed. It should have been okay with Zinke and Morton doing all the work and just letting the Green Boys in for quick power spots. Instead, Hammer and Vegas worked most of the match. At times it was surprisingly okay, but most of the time this wasn't the case. There was a few botched up spots and the brawling back and forth was terrible. After the match, Zinke and Vegas yelled at each other and it seemed like Zinke was issuing a challenge. I just hope it's for a one-on-one basketball game rather than another friggin' wrestling match. -0.5 star from Dave Meltzer. Yikes.
That's not good. That's not good. And it was just booked wrong. It was laid out wrong. You know who your best workers are in that match. So build it around them. The first place you start is with Ricky Morton. Ricky Morton was by far the best worker in that match. Not even close. But because, again, of age and size, that became somewhat of an issue. How Ricky Morton's work could ever be an issue with anybody is beyond ignorant. The match should have been built around Ricky selling, coming back, the whole 9 yards, whatever. Instead it was a -1/2 star performance. Not good.
So JR, your answer is don't cancel the match once Mr. Hughes gets pulled. Just rebook it so that your workers are working and your big guys aren't acting a fool like what kind of happened there. And there we go. So again, -0.5 star from Meltzer. We move on to some guys that could get it done in the ring, and it's a dream match in many, as you think about it. Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes defeating Larry Sabisco and Steve Austin. This was an 18-minute match, 18 minutes, 21 seconds, and it's a tremendous match, Meltzer would say, with good brawling back and forth. Austin's timing is just incredible, considering his experience. Just think about this. This is before Stone Cold. He's already commending him and recognizing his skill, his timing, and his work back here in 92. They got heat on Windham in the early portion, then heat on Rhodes later. Windham made the hot tag and came in and went for the superplex, but Sabisco shoved him off. Rhodes shoved Sabisco off the top rope, and Windham would get the pin after a flying lariat. Gave this one 3 3.75 stars, excuse me. So there you go. JR, do you see the greatness that is to come here with Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. He got the blue chipper remark before Rock. That was in WCW that he was. It just was so obvious to me that he was going to be a major star. once all the stars aligned. But this match was full of great workers. Dustin was young and advanced well beyond his level of experience. Barry Windham, when he wanted to go, was as good as anybody. And then Larry could be Larry. Can we talk about Bruno? No, Larry, we can't talk about Bruno. That was 20 years ago. People still remember in the Northeast. Okay, Larry. So, but all four of those guys are hellaciously good workers. And to come together and have a match that has some chemistry and so forth was pretty incredible to my estimation.
JR, it's brought up during this match here that Dusty Rhodes is going to return to the ring in Japan and team with Dustin. Was Dusty, to your knowledge, eager to get back into the ring at this point?
He was anxious to get back in the ring where the money was found. Of course, he was interested. It was new money. It's a different payday, and he was an old school guy. He was a payoff guy. So getting booked and then on a guarantee, which I'm sure he got a nice one, because he was a huge star in Japan at one point in time in a previous generation. But nonetheless, Dusty's got to make a living like everybody else. And he also, I think, it gave him a opportunity to get back in the ring and show everybody that I still got it. And he had it. He did have it. He did have it because of the psychology that he brought to these matches. I don't know if he was, in shape or
physically right,
healthy, all those things. But he didn't lose any charisma.
That's exactly what I was going to say. When you talk about getting a crowd engaged and get the crowd going, Dusty he was a choir director like no other when it came to the audience.
He was excellent, no doubt.
Up next, it's Bobby Eaton. Speaking of excellent, Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson. Man, what a combination. Retaining the WCW tag team titles, beating Rick and Scott Steiner via DQ with the dreaded Dusty finish in 20 minutes. They announced that Paul E. Dangerously was banned from ringside during this match. Yeah, apparently he needed some time for a costume change. Eaton and Anderson sold the Steiners big moves for the first half of the match, which consisted of power moves and slow down tactics in between. There was a lot of good moves, but it was slow paced in spots, and the consistency of crowd intensity wasn't what you'd expect. Rick came off the top rope to a knee in the groin, and they started working on Rick, but you didn't get a sense of a lot of sympathy. Scott came in, but was cut off and thrown over the top rope behind the ref's back. Rick made that hot tag, and they went to the finish. Anderson threw white powder in a bag into Rick's eyes, and since he couldn't see, he gave ref Randy Anderson a belly-to-belly suplex. Scott gave Bobby a Frankensteiner and got a 3 count when a second ref came in. Finally, head referee Nick Patrick came in and reversed the decision because Rick gave the ref a suplex. That finish wouldn't have been so bad if they hadn't done it so many house shows, like almost everyone, over the past 2 months. 3.25 stars. My God, JR, the tag team division is stacked, but this finish.
I don't know who we're protecting. There, to be honest with you. And why does one have to be protected? You got 2 great teams. Nobody can argue the point that we had featured 2 great teams in that match, which, by the way, just followed another great tag team match. So that's no easy, easy task. But man, I don't understand the DQ, the reversal, all that bullshit. It just convolutes things, it waters things down. It didn't forward anybody, in my opinion. So, but anyway, it's what it was.
I do want to ask you this. Meltzer seems to give a lot of stock to the finish in terms of his enjoyment of matches overall. Do you?
Say that again?
So Meltzer seems to give a lot of stock to the finish of the match in terms of if he enjoys the entirety of the match. He puts a lot of stock in how it's finished. Do you look at it that way? Can you enjoy a match regardless of how the finish comes down or if it's a ref?
Well, I get some enjoyment out of it, but absolutely. But I got more enjoyment if the finish met the criteria of the match. Everything's got to fit. And having this convoluted piece of business was not, in my idea, a good fit. I don't think we needed it because it's very easy for two amazingly talented villains like Double A and Bobby to steal one, as they say, from the Steiners. The Steiners are going to get their win back. It's not a matter of, what are we going to do with the Steiners now? Well, quite honestly, that's a big overrated thing in my opinion. You can't protect everybody. That should not be your goal. The goal should be to put the best match on that you humanly possibly can, and that finish has to lead to the next time that these two teams wrestle. So, but we were just playing night by night and day by day, and I don't know if the long-term planning even existed to any degree.
To your point, for the Steiners, it's not a matter of if, it's just when, right? So it's going to happen for them. It's just kind of, so I get you. Yeah. Listen, by the way, on air during this match, it's discussed how Kip Fry is attempting to sign Williams and Gordy. Is there a deal in place to mention them on commentary? Is it important to mention Kip's name so much? If Kip's name's mentioned on air, it's mentioned that you're going to sign working on those two. Do you remember kind of anything behind the scenes? Was this part of the deal of bringing them in, trying to pump up, get some excitement level?
Well, we had them pretty well locked up. Kind of agreed in principle to our deal. It's all about cash and creative. They knew that the creative was going to be fine because they could work with anybody. They knew how to win. They knew how to lose. Speaking of Doc and Gordy. But I think we were way down the road. We would never have mentioned them if we weren't pretty sure it was a done deal. It wasn't just out of the blue. Hey, let's mention Doc and Gordy. There was a plan there, and they had essentially committed. They're just kind of clean up some housekeeping issues because I think they had to get there. They had to take off a tour or something. I'm not sure. I can't remember all of it that long ago. So we just felt like it was an element that might create a little bit of a buzz. It sure did with me because I was excited about those guys coming in.
Speaking of a buzz, JR, the next match had a buzz about it. It's Rick Rude pinning Rick Steamboat, the Battle of the Ricks. 20 minutes, 1 second. Rick Rude pinned Steamboat. Let me say that again, to retain the U.S. title. Before the match, they aired several interview segments with Missy Hyatt. They appeared to be done live, but were actually filmed a week earlier in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where the Ninja chased Medusa away. Which one is supposed to figure led to dangerously guard the door in a ninja costume and come to the ring with Steamboat? This was a 70s style match. All the spots were perfect, and there were some nice moves thrown in, but kind of slow pace since they were going 20. Steamboat really turned it on at the end, with the finish coming when Paul Lee, the Ninja, hit Steamboat twice with the phone, and Rude pinned him 2 3/4 stars. These two are great together as well. This card is really well lined up. Similar styles and workers outside of the Vinny Vegas debacle match that happened. Do you think both Ricks were ahead of their time work-wise, JR?
Well, I guess so. You say that, make an argument for it. That match should have gone on before Bobby and Arn's tag match. That would have separated the tags. I don't know why that wasn't done. We can say that about so many issues and elements within the behind the scenes.
Rebooking the territory.
WCW, behind the scenes. But it wasn't. But they had great chemistry. And I think that was based on the amazing mutual respect that the two had with each other. I never heard anybody complain about working with Ricky Steamboat. Sometimes Rude could be a little bit challenging just because of his demeanor and his attitude from time to time, but not with these two guys. They got along really well and had a great respect. And then when he had that respect, it brings with it some trust. So if your opponent is suggesting a spot, and if you trust him well enough, you go for it. And it's not always that way. You got to have trust, and they did, and they had a great match. I mean, come on, it was one of the best matches of the entire night. Still, we're trying to get past and get over the hump from Liger and Pillman. That's been the star of the show so far.
That's right.
But nonetheless, that match, Rude and Steamboat, it was interesting, and also it wasn't a run-of-the-mill disqualification or count-out. They actually had a finish. It was a screw job, but still, the heel screwed Steamboat, Rude, meaning the heel, and he retained his title. Made all the sense in the world. So it's just one of those cases where if you look well enough into the situation, you can generally find a reason for a finish and not a count out or a DQ or whatever. I'm terribly against that. If you're too good to lose, then you're too good to work here. It's my theory.
I like that theory, and it makes sense. So let's move on to who lost in the main event. It is match 8. Sting wins the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. He defeats Lex Luger 13 minutes, 1 second. Luger was so huge, he looked like a member of a different species, according to Meltzer. If it hadn't have been confirmed already, this officially confirmed Luger's joining the WBF. They spent the first 2 minutes pretending they were doing a silent movie by standing there and doing nothing. Then they started working on the near 300-pound Luger, who blew up within 2 minutes. The match was kept simple, and it did have interest, but was a long way from a classic title change match. Luger controlled the match, pretty much playing Superman, even not selling a Stinger splash. Sting did get Luger in the torture rack. Sting kicked out of Luger's pile driver. Finish came out of nowhere when Sting decking Harley Race and pinned Luger with a crossbody block. Luger and Sting shook hands and embraced after the match, but on television, they switched to a crowd shot, so the folks at home didn't see it. 1.5 stars.
Yeah, they wouldn't have finished for themselves in that deal. It wasn't a time to hug. No hugging.
Yeah, can't do that.
Yeah, well, it was what it was. Look, there's been so many false starts regarding Sting becoming champion and Sting's push and all these things. It was just too little, too late. People knew Lex was leaving, by and large. A lot of fans did, and they knew that Sting and Lex were buddies, but we didn't need to rub it in their face. So I was underwhelmed by our closer.
And it kind of stinks if you think about it too, JR, because these guys, years in the making, everybody knew they were friends, kind of were the two superstars on the rise through the end of the 80s, early 90s. You hope that when the clash came that it would be a mega match. It just didn't work out that way. So a little disappointing in that regard too. Yeah,
it underdelivered, but I don't blame the talent so much entirely as I do the booking going into it. The false start booking. Is Lex going to be champion? Oh, it's going to be Sting. And of course this whole thing was a major show that didn't feature Ric Flair. And that's an issue because he was the best. And we didn't have him on the card because he didn't work for us. So, a lot of little things at play there that were where you want to say, maybe that's it. So it's, but finally they got the title on Sting, and I don't know what it meant at that point. I really don't. And I love Sting. I rode back from the hotel the other day with him. I think where were we? Nashville, maybe. And, we always enjoy our time together and shooting the breeze, laughing about Cowboy or whatever, telling stories and all those good things. So I'm a big Sting guy, and but his booking leading into some of these wins and this whole look of Sting becoming a champion and being a main event guy and all that stuff left a lot to be desired, and not because of him. It's just, start, stop, bad booking, too many politics, just stupid stuff that was totally unnecessary.
You gotta get excited about saving people all those dollars. They can limousine ride and jet flying out with that extra cash.
And they can style and profile with a quick 10-minute phone call right now to 425-0105.
That's 425-0105. Woo!
SaveWithConrad.com.
So anyway, he finally got there, but I don't know what it meant when he got there.
Well, JR, this would be the end of Lex and WCW until 1995. And what say you overall? Overall on the pay-per-view, thumbs up, thumbs down? What'd you think of this show?
I thought the guts of the pay-per-view were, obviously there's the matches that you would not book if you had a chance to go back and get the old eraser out. I would probably, that's easy to figure out. There's some matches that were stinkers. And some matches were misbooked. The wrong people got featured. So anyway, but if you look at the first match and you look at a couple of those tags in the middle, Steamboat and Rude, you can't help but give it a thumbs up. I don't think. I think you got to, because those guys worked their ass off and they were good matches. And then we had some stinkers, as I mentioned earlier, which is not unusual. But I would say it's worth it taking a peek at if you're a fan and haven't watched it. There's some matches on there with some of the stars involved in those that you probably would get a kick out of watching.
Listen, the first match alone, turn it on, watch it. If you want to fast forward through Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Terrence Taylor and Vinny Vegas, you can fast forward, but you're going to get the guys like Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson and Rick Rude and Ricky
Young
Steamboat.
Stone Cold.
It's Young Stone Cold. So there you go. Great card, fun show. By the way, JR, Kip Fry, he would pay bonuses to Brian Pillman, Jushin Liger, Ricky Steamboat, and Rick Rude, $2,500 apiece for their hard work. Thoughts on that? You think that's a good? Yeah.
Yeah. What could you look at it, Paul, and figure out how it was harmful?
No, I think it speaks to your point earlier when you're talking to Kip Fry that he was a very kind of players first leader. And that he wanted to try to do fun things to help these guys, even though he
tried to be
he
tried to be everybody's buddy. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a positive motivator and a positive administrator. A lot of guys like Kip. He took time to talk to people. He wasn't overbearing. He didn't come off as, I've been watching wrestling for 100 years and I know all about it. That was kind of Herd's deal. Herd's claim to fame was his relationship with Sam Muchnick in St. Louis. And that made him an honor student. Him meaning Jim Herd, pronoun boy. Those cheeks. Anywho, I like I said earlier, I like Kip. It's just the fact he got put into a position that he was not versed in. It's like saying you're going to be the general manager of our baseball team, but I hear you've never been to a baseball game. So it's kind of that deal.
Right.
But I liked Kip. He worked awful hard. He was there early. He stayed late.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had those little Friday meetings where we all got out of the office, which is a blessing. We got to have our lunch at that little Dawsonville restaurant.
That cabin sounds amazing.
Yeah, the cabin was great. And the hospitality and the fellowship, believe it or not, there is such an animal in wrestling. So Kip was trying to do the right things, but those things could not replace the deficiency that he had in raw product knowledge. So, but he was on the right track. The way to the talent's heart is cash.
Absolutely.
Pretty simple.
Still to this day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Jim, next week, you're looking back at Sting 1991, and that'll continue on with the Sting series that you started last month. And by the way, you and Conrad got a ton of great feedback on that episode that you did about Sting. Did you see some of the same feedback on that one?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, in 2 weeks, it's the man that's all of a sudden back in the professional wrestling discussion. You'll be breaking down Steve Austin's 1997, the year Austin stepped into the top spot and created his own destiny. You're going to break it all down here on Grilling JR. How about that? How about that, JR? Back in the discussion in pro wrestling right now.
That's pretty amazing. You know, I get people asking me all the time on social, you think Steve's going to wrestle and at WrestleMania? And I talked to him. I don't think he knows. And he's got all the I's have got to be dotted perfectly in place before he would attempt something like that. He's very particular, as he should be, protective of his legacy and his gimmick. And so I think it'll be a stretch if it happens. If it's going to happen, then smart marketers, and I think Vince is a very smart marketer. They got to get the word out there and sell tickets. That's why they're booking it. If he's able to do it, or they can make it work. I think he and Kevin Steen are what's his name there?
Kevin Owens, yeah.
Kevin Owens, yeah. I'm a big fan of his. Considering I taught him English, I don't know how good that is. But anyway, yeah, I don't think it'll happen, but you never know. We talked. So I said, well, you should call the match if it happens. There's a little thing called a contract. I'm under contract here in AEW until, I believe, end of April. So I'm under contract. It's just gossip. It's bullshit. Well, one thing about it, if JR don't call the match, they shouldn't have it. Well, that's stupid. Nobody's going to care. They're going to care about seeing Stone Cold, the glass breaking, him come down the ring with that BMF walk, throwing some hammers and fists and stomps, and bringing the intensity that he always brought. That's what they want to see. And they want to see Kevin Owens lose. And count your ass, he will, if he's wrestling with Austin at WrestleMania. I just don't, I'm leery. I'm leery that it will ever happen. And I'm not being negative Nelly. I just think there's a lot of barriers that have to be crossed. And I know Steve stays in great shape, but he's not in ring shape. He's just not. He looks great, and he's lean and solid and tight, but still, he's not been in the ring and running the ropes and doing all those things that create a unique cardiovascular scenario to be ready to go. So would I like to call it? Well, of course. Who wouldn't? If you're an announcer, you get an Austin match at WrestleMania, are you crazy? Of course I would. But it's not even in the cards. It's not even attainable. So, but we'll see how it works out for him. For Steve's sake, I want him to do what makes him happy. If he thinks having one more match with a guy like Kevin Owens, then I'm all for it.
Home state of Texas, Dallas Stadium. They're trying to sell that place out, not one, but 2 nights. And recently he posted on his Instagram his diet of fish, tilapia and rice. And I mean, all it did, he recommended a nutritionist. And all it did was every comment underneath of it was, does this mean you're wrestling? Is this because you're on a diet? You're wrestling? Are you wrestling at WrestleMania? I mean, it set the world on fire.
Right. Of
People
course.
are excited though,
Absolutely. And why wouldn't they be? The greatest star in the history of WWE coming back for a long awaited return. It's money. But you got to tell them, you got to tell them to sell them. You can't sell goods out of an empty wagon. So it's either are we going to go do this or we're not? And so if you're going to market it to its full maximum potential, you need to shit or get off the pot.
Let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about jrsbbq.com. Let's shit and get off. Let's talk about that because that's the good shit. That's the barbecue sauce we all want, the seasonings we all crave, the mustard we all love.
It's grilling time, man. Every day's grilling time.
We're getting into spring now, buddy, up here in the Northeast. It's time to take the covers off the grill.
Oh, yeah. Hell yes. Absolutely. And there's things that you can do with our products that have nothing to do with the grill.
That's right.
You got a stove, that type deal. So, I can't have a grill here at my complex. So I bought a pan that has these grid things on it that give it, grill marks. So I cheat a little bit, but I still get the job done with a steak or a burger or whatever the case may be, grilled chicken. So, but there's a lot of things you can do with our products that are prepared, that you can prepare indoors. And of course, the all-purpose seasoning has become one of the big hits of what we do. And people are realizing there's so many ways to use that product, and it tastes great, whether it's on vegetables. I fry a potato on a skillet, and I'll season the hell out of it with our seasoning. And I sometimes cut up a purple onion in with a little bit of oil in my potatoes, and it makes the house smell good. That sounds corny, I guess, but so there's a lot of ways to use it, and that you like. I went on a kick for about 2 weeks where I couldn't get enough of the Chipotle ketchup. I use it as a steak sauce. I warmed it up a little bit, use it as a steak sauce. It's great. It's great on burgers. It's great in meatloaf. So, and then of course our number one seller is the original barbecue sauce, which is near and dear to my heart because that was my mother's recipe. So I think people try it, they're going to say, "Oh, JR's mom was onto something." It's really good stuff. So jrsbbq.com is the website where we never close. We have great customer service, and we appreciate everybody's business. It means a lot. We don't have an ad budget. This is pretty much it. So word of mouth and so forth. So if you're on social and you get a chance to send out something from the site, I love when people post pictures of using our products in a variety of ways. It's kind of entertaining to me. So, but things are good. And for the way I was raised and how I live my life, it's never not grilling season. It's healthier. There's a lot of good in this scenario, in addition to selling some barbecue sauce and making an extra $1 or $2. Can't deny that's one of the reasons I'm in it. We want to make some money, and I want to build I think my mom and my late wife would be very pleased with what I'm trying to do. So jrsbbq.com, great for gifts. We got a lot of signed items. We got signed books, Under the Black Hat and Slobberknocker. So it's a fun little site, and you might say it's a vanity project, but I'm just having a blast messing with it. Stephen Link runs that site, and he's taken ownership of it, which is what he had to do, and he does a good job. So check it out, and I think you'll be pleased that you did. Quite frankly, we talk about it enough here. I told somebody this in that ad-free shows thing Zoom. The other day.
Yeah,
the Zoom deal. That I'm sure you guys get tired of me talking about the site, but that's the only way to get the message out. Communication. So that's what we're doing. It's all working out good, and I'm happy with that aspect of it, and I'm happy with what's happening in AEW. I think everybody's building up real strongly to that pay-per-view coming up, and down in Orlando. I'm looking forward to it. It's a car trip for me. No trip to the airport and the TSA and screaming babies and often grandmas and all that stuff. So anyway, it's all good. Looking forward to that. And I think we're going to have a hell of a show. So, and just follow along on, Rampage on Friday nights on TNT. And of course, on Wednesdays, Dynamite, our flagship show is going to do a good job of leading you to that pay-per-view with the reasons that you should buy it. And it's that simple.
When you got the Battle of the Atoms, Cole and Page, you got the dog collar match, you got Thunder Rosa, DMD. I mean, my goodness, that's just 3 matches, and I can't wait to see you right there.
Yeah. Tony Khan's done a good job of booking what he wants to see, and what he wants to see is very close to what guys like you and me want to see.
That's right.
That's the thing about Tony. He's not so corporate whatsoever when it comes to the booking. He's got some real good instincts and feels of that thing. So that's what's fun about working with him. He's a bundle of energy. He's a dynamo. So it's all fun.
And we might get Danielson versus Moxley. So who knows? We'll see if that's
never
that's
know.
Announced.
Yeah,
so,
it's coming.
But man, I tell you what, it's coming. I'll be in the building for that show, so I'm looking forward to being there in Orlando.
You're going to be in Orlando?
Yes, sir. I will be there for that show. So
you got a hall pass from the missus?
I got a hall pass from the missus, and I'll be there with another longtime buddy and official. Mike Chioda is going to be in the house for that show.
Wow,
so
that's
we're
good.
going to have some fun there.
We love old Mike. Mike did a great job for many years as the third man in the ring. Shall we say?
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's good.
Very good. Well, listen, always a pleasure to work with you, JR. Check him out, jrsbbq.com. I love hearing you talk about it because I've tried the products and they are damn good. This just isn't a, hey, let's just talk about it and help them. Can you help them? No, this shit is good stuff. You're going to come back and be a return customer. It's true. Oh, it's damn true, as Kurt Angle would say. I mean, you're going to come back as a returning customer, no doubt about it. So I'm glad we can help you out with that. So talk about it as much as you want. You should be proud of what you've built there.
I am. And it's all in my, and with the right way of thinking. It's all the legacy of my mom and Jan, so
that's great.
I just think that the karma's good there. It's just, you guys got to try it.
Yeah. Try it once.
Try one bottle of something.
That's all you got to do.
And every week, Steven's got specials. We do a thing where I had suggested we create a mailing list off emails. So we're doing that, and that's working out well. And people don't have to worry. Oh, if I get my email to JR, it'll be sold or whatever. Guarantee they don't have it. So, but if you do sign up to our email, then all of a sudden you're ahead of the line on specials and flash sales and all those things. So life is good, Paul. Life is good. I'm happy to still be able to do my job, and I'm loving every minute of it. So,
well, we're happy to have you here and have you part of Grilling JR and be able to reflect back on these events and these stories. And you're going to be back next week. It's Sting 1991 with the man who was there, Jim Ross, the voice of wrestling. JR, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this week. We'll see you again next week right here on Grilling JR.
Thank you, Paul. Good job tonight. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Tell your friends about our show, and we'll be right back here with you next week. Good Lord willing.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.